Hi everyone, Stjepan here. Today I'm going to cover the last round game from Berlin. My game against Bergmann Jens, an opponent who, well, I saw the pairing the evening before the game. I was quite upset to have been paired against somebody weaker than me, because as you may have seen, the tournament started badly. Then in rounds 7 and 8 I managed to play well, win both games, and I was on 4.5 out of 8, which was a good score. So there was a chance to get paired against somebody high rated. So if I had gotten paired against somebody 2100 or 2050, a win would mean that I would have a plus score ELO wise in the tournament. And when I got paired against the gentleman whom I ended up playing, the immediate psychological effect was, oh, even if I win, I'm still losing points, which wasn't good. But then I managed to compose myself and just say to myself, it doesn't matter, win the game, it's going to be fine. 3 wins in a row would be great. So I had the black pieces, and when I was looking at his games, I didn't know what I wanted to play. So my main opening now is the Sicilian, and well, against the Sicilian he often plays the early f4, which in theory is bad for white, but you have to prove why. And since I've just started playing the Sicilian, I don't have as much experience in the weird sideline systems, especially aggressive Grand Prix-like systems with the early f4, and I didn't want to risk much. And I've therefore decided to play the Caro-Kann. Now, the only game of his I've seen against the Caro-Kann was against the classical with bishop f5. He played the tricky knight c5. I'm going to show you the position. So after e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3 takes, knight takes, bishop f5. 99% of people play knight g3, and that's by far the best move. But knight c5 is also a move. And after knight c5, well, it's a lot of theory here. You can allow black to take your b7 pawn, doesn't really matter. You can sacrifice it to win a pawn back later. I don't want to get into that, but I saw that he plays knight c5, and I prepared for knight c5. I also prepared for some other lines in the classical, and usually after knight takes e4, as you may know, I played the Karpov Caro-Kann with knight b to d7. I find the position more pleasant. But since he is a tactical player and plays a lot of aggressive lines and plays, well, f4 against the Sicilian, I expected him to play something like, against the Karpov knight bd7, to play something like the early knight g5, which is the most aggressive move. And I know the lines pretty well, but I didn't want to get him an opportunity to play a position he would like. So after a long time, I played the classical Caro-Kann. I haven't played that in about 2 years. Okay, so bishop f5, knight g3, he ended up playing, he didn't play knight c5. And I've studied the classical Caro-Kann for a long while. I've been through 2 books that only cover bishop f5, so I was pretty familiar with anything that could happen. So bishop g6, knight f3, knight d7. You play knight d7 first to stop knight e5. If you play e6 first, then knight e5 is a threat. So knight d7, h4, h6, h5, bishop h7. This is all theory. If you are unfamiliar with the classical Caro-Kann, watch the video I've made on the opening. And just 3 days ago, I had a discussion with Phil. Cheers, Phil, who is a student of mine who plays the French defense. And he said, well, okay, I'm going to be playing the French, where I just keep my bishop on c8 instead of having it chased for 5 moves, which is sort of true. So in my opinion, the Caro-Kann is an improved French, where you simply play without the bad bishop on c8 and have the same pawn structure. And in his opinion, it's better to keep the bishop on c8 and free it up later than to have to move it 5 times. Well, okay. Sorry for the digression, but he is partially correct only in the classical variation where the bishop does move a lot. So if I go back a few moves, after bishop g6, knight f3, h4 can be played immediately, knight d7, h4, h6, h5, and bishop h7. The bishop has now moved to f5 from c8, to g6 from f5, and to h7 from g6, and black has also had to play the move h6. So if you look at this position, out of the 7 moves, 5 moves revolved around the bishop. And the main theoretical move for white here is bishop to d3, which simply trades the bishop off. And black has no other option but to take, so take, take. And white has just managed to trade off his bishop, which he has only moved once, and in exchange for trading it got a queen tempo and developed the queen, so basically exchanged it for free. For a piece that has caused black to move 5 times. So if you look at the position now, black has h6, c6, knight d7, and white has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a lead in development and 3 pieces developed instead of 1 piece. So the classical Caro-Kann may seem strange, but it's a very sound opening because after something like e6 or knight f6, black has this very solid pawn structure which isn't easy to break through, and black is playing for dark square control, and this bishop is going to be the main protagonist in the position. The knights are also great, controlling d5, controlling b6, coming into c4 if possible, coming into e4. A lot of possibilities. So black definitely has compensation. And coming back to the game, after bishop h7, which is a position we'd reached fairly quickly, maybe I've spent nothing. I was 4 minutes ahead because the game is 90 plus 30. And he spent maybe 5 minutes. In this position, he made a mistake which isn't a losing mistake, but strategically the game is much better for black after that. So my opponent played the move bishop c4. Why is bishop c4 so horrible? Well, firstly, you are not challenging the now very good bishop on h7. My bishop is cutting across almost the entire board, stopping a lot of ideas like knight f5, knight e4, queen d3, and my bishop is just a monster, much better than his bishop. Furthermore, he is not trading a piece for a piece that has moved 5 times, so that's another thing. He could have gained tempo. So imagine these 2 pieces not being on the board and the queen being on d3. That's an improvement for white. And thirdly, black is going to play e6, which he always plays. And now this bishop doesn't do anything. The best it can do is go back to d3, and in fact that's the best move here. Go back to d3 and force a trade, and black will have gained the tempo. However, after bishop c4 and e6, it's not hard to admit you made a mistake, especially if you don't realize that you made a mistake. And he just left the bishop on c4, and the bishop basically did nothing for the rest of the game. Now, okay, there were some tactical implications because of the bishop. There were some sacrifices possible when the knight is on e5, some sacrifices on f7. When the queen is on e2, there's bishop takes e6 as a possibility and stuff like that. But if black is careful, this bishop is rendered useless after it's placed on c4. Okay, after e6 he played bishop f4, which is an okay move, but the problem with bishop f4 is that now my knight is coming into the center, and I would like to trade it off if white wishes to trade it off, because I sort of have superfluous knights. If his knight gets into e5, I'm going to have to take it. If it doesn't, my 2 knights are doing nothing. I would like to get rid of one of them. So knight gf6, queen to e2, and now knight d5. I want to stop any possibilities of bishop takes e6. I want to threaten the bishop. I want to get the bishop pair, because his bishop on c4 is still better than my knight on d5. And if I force him to take my knight on d5, that means that my bishop is going to roam around the board unchecked and unchallenged for the rest of the game. And here he made a mistake. He played rook h4. Rook h4 defends the bishop, but as you can see, it's a tactical problem in most positions. So immediately, if the knight comes into e5, the rook is hanging. So he sort of prevented his pieces from moving easily. And now I had a long think. There were a couple of possibilities. I can, of course, take the bishop immediately, but if I take the bishop, I think I just lose, takes. If I try something like bishop e7, then rook takes f7, and this would be maybe not lost immediately, but definitely losing for black on a human level. So taking immediately would be a mistake, because the rook is coming to f4 and I can't take. The problem is, which he probably didn't see, that I don't have to take the bishop yet. Okay, and I was trying to look for candidate moves. Knight d2 f6 was one of them, definitely. But then I saw this check. And this check is annoying. Now, I didn't see everything during the game. And I couldn't calculate all the variations. But the most obvious move, bishop to d2, comes with a threat. Okay, so the first thing, let's just discard c3 because of knight takes, pawn takes, bishop check, and after bishop d2, black wins the rook. Okay, so that's, you cannot defend with the pawn, which would be the most convenient way to defend because of this annoying knight on d5. Okay, the second option you have is knight to d2, which, I mean, is just a bad move because I can just take on c2, or I can take on f4 and then take on c2, but probably just taking on c2 is enough, winning a pawn. The third option, which was the trickiest one to calculate, is bishop d2. And now the thing I had to calculate was, can I take on c2 or not? Because once I take on c2, my knight is defending the bishop on c2 if he takes. So what am I talking about? Bishop c2. Bishop takes b4, knight takes b4. My knight defends the bishop conveniently. And if he tries a3, I thought I had to move queen a5. The problem is, after queen a5, black is just busted because he can play queen d2. And now my knight is hanging from the queen, not from the pawn, but from the queen. So if I try to move my bishop, queen takes knight and game over. So after bishop b4 check, I wasn't sure if I was going to take on c2 if he plays bishop d2. I was planning to calculate that later. I just figured that he may play king f1 because bishop c2 is hard to calculate, and I was correct. And after king f1, my semi-bluff worked. His king is now awful on f1. Okay, and now I have to take the bishop, so I just take, so takes. Now that I can castle safely, rook takes f4 and castles. There's no more rook takes f7 because, yeah, just be worse. He doesn't have anything here. He's going to win the exchange back, but he is whole piece down. Okay, so after castles, he played knight e5, which is correct. I have to take. I cannot leave the knight on e5, and I'm not afraid to get the pawn to e5. Why? Because after knight e5, d5, knight e4, and coming into d6 can always be met with bishop takes e4, and then I'm left with a much better piece. Now, there's a problem though. If he tries knight e4 immediately, I played bishop to e7, because bishop e7 stops knight e4 and knight f6 check, which I was afraid of, and it also, well, my bishop is not a tactical liability, and it also controls both f6, g5, and h4, and the crucial d6 square. And now the thing is, if he plays knight e4, okay, if I take it and he takes with the queen, this is now getting very complicated to play after bishop d3. And what do I do here? I may have to play something like f5 and allow this, but I don't think this is good for me. Okay, maybe it is, but I didn't want to risk anything with a position like this. So taking is never an option after bishop e7. Still, after he plays knight e4, I wanted to play the move queen c7 and just have a solid position, because I don't see what his threat is. I would have just played queen c7. If he comes into f6, there's nothing. Maybe after queen g4, but I still think there's nothing. Yeah, okay, now I'm threatening just to take the pawn. The problem is that his e5 pawn is always loose after queen c7, so he basically has to do something. And I don't know what he does. I think knight e4, queen c7 is better for black. Okay, but after bishop e7, he played rook d1. And now, after rook d1, first I wanted to play queen b6, but then I started being afraid of rook d7, bishop g5, and rook takes f7. No, sorry, the other rook takes f7. Rook takes f7 because of takes, takes, bishop takes e6, and I couldn't see what to do here. If something like rook f8, then queen f3, and yeah, this is lost. But then I saw that queen b6 and rook d7 can be met with queen takes b2, and if he takes my bishop, queen c1 check wins the f4 rook. So queen b6 was a serious candidate move, but then I wanted to stop knight e4, so I played queen c7 instead. And now, if knight e4 is impossible, then black should be much better and close to winning. If I turn on the engine, It's minus 0.5, but what does white do here? I think, well, I have the bishop pair, I control a lot of key squares, my king is much safer, I have no weaknesses, and he has the c2 weakness to start with. I have a tempo gain on g5. If I trade off the rooks, I'm going to be better, and the position is just easy to play. It's hard to find a plan for white. But he did blunder with knight e4, and what he thought was that I cannot take on e5 because of knight f6 check, but I can take. Of course, it's check and my queen is hanging, but I just take the knight with the bishop and it's game over. If he takes my queen, I take with the bishop. If he takes my bishop, I take with the queen. So knight e4 is just a blunder, and it's such a losing blunder that the game is over immediately. His rook is hanging, his b2 pawn is hanging, I'm threatening f5, I'm threatening bishop takes e4. It's all over. So if he moves the rook away, then I just win the knight. If he defends the rook, then I don't know, I can just probably play bishop g5 and win. He played the worst move. He played rook g4 and now just f5. He was counting on the move f4, probably missed that the rook is no longer defending the knight, but there's an even stronger move. I can just take the rook, and because the rook is hanging, the pawn is pinned. And the game is over. After f4, he resigned on his own move. And yeah, so it was a 20-move win. Don't mess with the Caro-Kann. I mean, if you don't know how to play against the classical Caro-Kann, don't play knight c3, because even though the position seems kind of strange and black's play seems strange, the position is solid, and if black knows what he's doing, it's very hard to gain any edge with white. I would say that in the classical Caro-Kann, black is equal most of the time, and in fact, he is the one who has more tricks and more attacking possibilities. So the tournament in Berlin ended with 5.5 out of 9, -3 ELO points, which is unfortunate, but the most important thing is that after 4 extremely tough rounds, so 3, 4, 5, and 6, I did manage to pull myself together and win the last 3 games, so that was very important to me. Okay, continuing with normal theory, I am going to start recording the Slav defense today. I don't know if the first video will be published today, maybe tomorrow, but maybe today. And after the Slav, my patrons are going to decide about the recording schedule. I'm going to put up a vote tomorrow or on the next day, and I'm going to give them a few options for d4 theory, and they're going to vote on which opening to record first. So I'm continuing with d4 theory. I'm not sure which opening is coming next, but the Slav is starting today or tomorrow. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Sorry if the video was long and I digressed too much. And stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.